Good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar on healthcare compliance with a focus on HIPAA and HITRUST. My name is Kishore Veswani, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of ControlCase. I really appreciate the time you have taken today to attend this webinar on healthcare compliance. Hope everybody is keeping safe along with their families during this time. A few housekeeping items before we get started. As we go through the webinar today, please feel free to put any questions in the questions window. And if you have any difficulty hearing or viewing the screen, please also put that in the chat window, and we will be moderating that on an ongoing basis. Our webinar today is expected to run 20 to 25 minutes, and we should have ample time for questions and answers after that. Certainly feel free to log on to our website at www.controlcase.com for any past webinars, and we'll be sending a copy of these slides as well as a recording in future, in the next week of this webinar. That being said, let's go ahead and get into the presentation today. Our agenda today is really to go over key healthcare compliance drivers. We'll certainly talk about HIPAA and HITRUST, and we'll give you a little bit of background on ControlCase and its solution as well. A little bit about ControlCase. So we focus on IT compliance, IT certifications, and related continuous compliance services. Our focus with customers is to be a partner to them, their compliance and certification journeys, as well as to ensure that we use automation wherever possible. That we use automation wherever possible for streamlining the compliance process as we go through this today. Here are a few examples of some compliance and certification services that we focus on. Certainly today, our focus would be on the HITRUST certification, as well as talk a little bit about HIPAA. All right, so that was a high level about ControlCase. Let's move into our healthcare compliance drivers. So when we talk about healthcare compliance drivers, here are some of the areas we'll cover in today's presentation. HIPAA is really a federal regulation. HITRUST is a common security framework that's used to assess security around PHI or other sensitive data. The HITRUST Alliance really manages HITRUST, and certainly there's a lot of more information available on the HITRUST website as well. When we talk about customer requirements and internal audits, we are really talking about ensuring that we are talking about anyone looking at their customers from a healthcare compliance perspective, as well as any internal audit aspect, put from a compliance perspective. When we talk about PHI, personal health information, here are the types of things that we are looking at when we talk about PHI. Some of these are, evidentiary, such as medical record numbers, but some of the things that can be associated may not be as intuitive, such as names, geographical identifiers, fingerprints, and things like that, which can again tie back to PHI and medical records. And again, we'll be sending a copy of the slides So you would have some of this data in a written format. So we talked about at a high level about the need for medical compliance and so forth. Let's talk about what is HIPAA. So HIPAA was put into place in 1996, and it basically established a set of administrative, physical, and technical controls around security and privacy that were needed to ensure healthcare security in the ecosystem. It applies to both healthcare providers and also business associates, which means in cases where you're providing or one of your service providers is providing anything which comes in contact with PHI. It covers and ensures assessment of compliance of business associates, which has been put in place as of 2013 as well. Some of the common terminology you will hear when you talk about HIPAA, you would also hear about HITECH and Omni-bus rules as well. So if you hear those are really tied back to HIPAA. And really, HITECH basically extends security, privacy, and breach notifications to business associates or third parties or vendors. And the Omnibus rule, really finalizes the interim rules that were set in HITECH. So when you think about HITECH and Omnibus, think of vendor management or third-party management as it relates to HIPAA and HIPAA compliance of business associates, third parties, and so forth, of course, across security, privacy, and breach notification arenas. I'm not going to go through every penalty, but here are some examples of fines and penalties that could be levied due to various situations that may be result from willful neglect, or by individual neglect. As you can see, the penalties really could add up because they are levied per violation, and per violation could mean really per loss of record all the way through per incident breach. And so the impact of this could be far-ranging because the penalties are really on a per violation basis, and the annual maximums are fairly significant. Let's get a little bit more deeper into HIPAA, and let's talk specifically about the privacy aspects. When we talk about the privacy aspects, HIPAA has three aspects: privacy, we're going to talk about security, and breach notifications. So from a privacy perspective, the high-level impetus of the privacy rule is to ensure that patients have right over their health information. Basically, it sets limits and conditions to the use and disclosures that may be made without patient authorization. So at a high level, the privacy rule gives patients the right to enforce how and when their healthcare information should be used. And it certainly ensures that it takes into effect the overall medical situations, but also personal patient privacy concerns. For business associates, it means that anyone who's servicing a healthcare provider also has the same level of due diligence that's required, just like the entity that actually was the consumer of private health information. So we talked about the privacy rule. The next aspect is the security rule. And when we talk about the security rule, we are really talking about ensuring that security, when it relates to administration, technical safeguards, and physical security, is appropriately maintained. So for example, when we talk about physical security, these are physical locks and disposable media and reusable media and so forth. When we talk about administrative safeguards, we're talking about risk management, password management, logging, and so forth. And then the technical safeguards, which is things like user IDs, methods to authenticate and authorize, encryption, and so forth. So the security rule really goes across administrative, technical, and physical safeguards that exist out there. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about breach notifications. The breach notification guidelines require that the breach aspects are documented and tested so that the notification of the right agencies and the right customers happens if a breach happens, and this has been tried and tested in the past. So basically, a breach is generally any disclosure of privacy or the security rule. And there are various thresholds. As you can see, the threshold is approximately 500 records, so it's not a very high threshold. And this includes notifying individuals, media, health and human services, and ensures that all affected parties have to be notified, and the burden of proof lies with the covered entities and the business associates. So HIPAA requirements apply to the business associates and subcontractors. So the entire ecosystem of agencies that are in the chain of PHI need to be looked at when we look at HIPAA requirements at a high level. So, we talked about medical compliance at a very high level. Then we did a deep dive into HIPAA, which is a federal law, and it covers privacy, security, and breach notifications. The next section of our presentation will include talking about HITRUST. So HITRUST is a certification that's maintained by the HITRUST Alliance. An important use case of HITRUST is the healthcare industry, although HITRUST generally covers other non-healthcare related agencies as well. And so we'll introduce you to HITRUST certification, and so forth in the next section. HITRUST exists to make sure that information security is adopted in a proper manner. It really collaborates with healthcare, business, technology, and information security, and has established a certifiable framework across these industries. Our focus today, when we talk about HITRUST, will be really focused on the healthcare industry. So the objectives of HITRUST within healthcare is to make sure that there is a holistic approach and a prescriptive, scalable, and certifiable process within the healthcare industry to protect PHI data. HIPAA is a law and could be interpreted in many ways. And so to get more consistent, HITRUST was formed to ensure that people are looking at healthcare compliance and are having a framework to be able to certify healthcare compliance. It also establishes trust between covered entities, their business associates, and their subcontractors, and really provides a practical, efficient, and consistent adoption of security in the healthcare industry. I'm not going to go through all these domains, and certainly all of you will have a listing of this, but here are some examples of domains that are covered by HITRUST as part of their self-assessment, as part of their either as part of their self-assessment or as part of their certifications on an ongoing basis. These domains would extend across common things you see in, as you would expect to see within the information security, compliance, and privacy domains. Again, I won't go through each one of these, but you guys will all have a listing of these domains. And they range across policies, procedures, encryption, endpoint protection, risk management, physical security, logging, all the common aspects that you would see in a well set up information security program. So What are the key components of the HITRUST CSF assurance program? First of all, standardization of tools. So there's the MyCSF tool and portal, which is an industry-leading tool to manage and get certified to HITRUST regulations. It makes sure it focuses on the actual risk exposure and does a deep dive on the different domains that we talked about. What it also does is it makes sure that the output is consistent and is consistently evaluated and interpreted across the industry. It also authorizes and allows assessors. So companies like ControlCase are assessors to the HITRUST certification program and can certify companies to the HITRUST standard. And so HITRUST maintains and ensures the quality of assessors such like us from overall assurance perspective. What is the end product of a HITRUST certification? So you get once you engage a third party like us to assess you against the HITRUST standard, what you get is a certified or a validated report that someone like ControlCase would submit to HITRUST, and HITRUST would re-verify that it meets an independent criteria and of objectivity of security and compliance. It includes things like maturity scores, because HITRUST has a lot of data across the healthcare industry when it comes to harmonization of industry scores. It does make sure that consistent testing summary, corrective action plans, and so forth are reflected in cases where gaps may exist. And it ensures that there's harmonization across business and organizational units, across criteria, across the 19 different areas that we showed early on. A good way to think how HIPAA and HITRUST can relate to each other is HIPAA is federal law, HITRUST is a certification. And so if you want to demonstrate compliance to HIPAA, one of the ways you could do it is by getting certified or validated to the HITRUST standard. And so these are examples of areas where there's an overlap between HIPAA and HITRUST. HITRUST covers all these different areas: risk assessment, policies, patch management, vulnerability management, and so forth. All these areas enable HIPAA and HITRUST compliance, HIPAA compliance through an HITRUST certification. And so as we get the presentation in healthcare compliance together, think of HIPAA as federal law, think of HITRUST as a certification, and think of demonstrating compliance to HIPAA using HITRUST certification or validation is a good way to think about a holistic view to healthcare compliance within the healthcare industry. So, we talked a little bit about ControlCase, we talked about healthcare compliance, we talked about HIPAA, how it encompasses privacy, security, and breach notification. We talked about HITRUST certification and validation. And we said how HITRUST certification can be used to validate compliance to HIPAA. As I said, please feel free to put questions in the questions window as we go through to this today. If you do have any questions, the next section will focus on how we as ControlCase can help. Here's a high-level HITRUST assessment process by ControlCase. The first step is for the customer to purchase a MyCSF subscription. Customer uploads all the different data, including self-scoring, to the MyCSF portal. Certainly, ControlCase can assist as questions come up through that process. Once the customer feels that they are good with uploading the data to the MyCSF portal, they would purchase a validated assessment. ControlCase would then evaluate the data that the customer had uploaded to the MyCSF portal and make sure we are looking at it from an independent and objective perspective. Once that's done, we would submit it to the HITRUST organization, and then we would work with HITRUST towards getting a final certification or validation. From an overall perspective, there are many things that need to be done as part of HITRUST. Vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, log monitoring, and so forth. ControlCase also provides all the cybersecurity services that are associated with many of the security testing and some of the more technical aspects of getting compliant to HITRUST, and for that fact, any of the other regulations that exist out there where we practice in. Certainly, as you look at ControlCase for any of your IT compliance and certification needs, we are certainly your partners in your compliance and certification needs. We focus on automation, and we certainly make compliance a continuous activity. That is all I had. A copy of this slides as well as the recording will be sent to everybody. I will now answer any questions that you may have put in the questions window. The first question I have is, what is the relationship between regulations like HITRUST, HIPAA, as well as PCI DSS? So that's a good question. At a high level, a lot of the requirements, such as logging, penetration testing, and so forth, are the same. The difference you can think of is something like HIPAA focuses on healthcare protection of healthcare data, and something like PCI focuses on protection of cardholder data. The second question is, how long does it take to get a HIPAA compliance report and a HITRUST certified report? So I would say for a company that's looking for a first time, who's working with us for the first time, a HIPAA compliance report can be obtained, within 60 to 90 days. I would say a HITRUST certification or validation is about a 6 to 8 month process. So, and it could be first getting a HIPAA compliance report on your way to HITRUST certification. Well, that was all the questions that were sent out today. I thank everybody for their time. A copy of the slides will be sent out next week, and this webinar will be available on our website. Everybody, please keep safe, and I look forward to speak to you guys attending future webinars. Thank you, and have a nice and safe day.